Welcome everybody to the final session. Those who haven't met me, I'm Martin Breeden. I'm the conference chair here today at Revo. Before I hand over to Howard, I'm going to quickly plug the Revo Diploma in Retail and Leisure Place Management. We've heard an awful lot of change that's happened over the last couple of years, and an awful lot more to come, listening to those last guys. So for those of you, or those of you who know colleagues who would appreciate participating in this diploma to enhance their employability skills, their upskilling, then do have a look at this on our website. There's plenty of tickets around with details on it. Or talk to Catherine Lambert of Savills. Okay, thanks very much. I'll hand you over to Howard.
Thanks, Martin. Well, a very warm welcome this afternoon. It's been great to be here today. The reason that we are here today is that we have got a problem in the property industry, which is that attitudes towards minorities are poor and they're getting worse. And this is not my personal opinion. This is rooted in data and research that has been issued this year. So despite the pandemic, despite Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Be Kind, despite everything that has happened in the last couple of years, things are going the wrong direction. So we are here today to interrupt that trajectory, and we are all in this together, and we invite you to join us in interrupting that trajectory, because it's not right, and there is loads of upside to getting this right. So we're going to talk a bit about today about our privileges, about what it means to have white privilege, what it means to have male privilege or able-bodied privilege. This might feel a little bit uncomfortable at times, but I promise you we are all on the same side. The fact that you're here means that you're already thinking about how you can contribute, how you can make a difference. And this is not just because it is the right thing to do. It also makes commercial sense. There is nobody at this conference today who does not want an extra helping hand with a bit of commercial performance. That's why we're all here today. So, we're going to start with a short poll. So everyone get your phones out, get connected, and you could just be honest here, okay? Like we're all friends. We're all in the same team. Just based on what you see in this panel, what was the first thing that you saw? If we could have the poll open. So here are the options, if you can't already see it on Slido. Did you see gender? Did you see race? Did you see disability? Or did you see sexuality? Right, so let's have a look at those results. 48% saw gender. About 40%, still moving, so keep voting. About 40% saw disability, race at 12, and 0 at sexuality, which is good to know I'm still pretty invisible. The clue's in the shirt, okay? Right, so let's, enough about me. Let's go back to the slides, and we'll come back to those stats. So Amanda, welcome.
Hello.
Do you want to just give yourself a quick intro to the crowd?
Hi, everybody. My name's Amanda Clack. I'm an Executive Director at CBRE, Head of Strategic Advisory, past President of RICS. Possibly the kind of key thing for today is talking about a book that I co-authored with Judith Gabler, which is called Managing Diversity and Inclusion in Real Estate. So really passionate about the next generation of talent coming through and attracting those into this sector.
Fab. Thanks, Amanda. So we will jump forward to another question. So, Amanda, your question. Do you want to ask the audience?
So, have you ever faced a situation at work where you have felt uncomfortable in bringing your whole self to the conversation? And the options for you are?
Yes and no. We kept it real simple. While people make a choice on this, I mean, this was really relevant to a lot of people. I'm sure many people, I'll be surprised if we don't get a lot of yeses on this. Let's see how the results are coming out. Can we flick over to the results?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nearly
so
70%.
What do you think that's telling us, Amanda?
Well, I think it's really interesting, and I'd like to think in many ways the barriers are coming down, I think particularly after the last sort of 18 months that we've had. But I think, the fact that we've got 68% of the audience here who are still feeling that they can't be themselves in the workplace is a really shocking statistic. And I think, we've got to do more. We're at an inflection point, actually, in the market, particularly as we come back to the office. I think really to start looking at culture. And there's a real opportunity to change and reset that culture in terms of making it more accessible to all people, and for everybody to kind of be themselves in the workplace. I mean, why wouldn't you? One of the things I've loved over the last 18 months is we've had baby ducks hatch, we've had a couple of weddings, we've had, I think, 4 babies, actually one had twins, so 4 babies in my team. We've also had, dogs coming onto the video screen. We've actually seen the inside of people's homes. We've had some sort of fancy dress. So actually you saw more of the real person actually kind of coming into the workplace. And what we've actually agreed as a team is that we want to make sure that as we come back to the office, that we still feel able to share some of those things that might just otherwise have been hidden.
Perfect. And if we can just go back to the slides, this brings us to tip number 1. So this is about telling your story, right? This is about sharing and having the courage to, even when you felt uncomfortable with something, actually sharing, being vulnerable, being willing to share that stuff. That's really important, isn't it? It's
really important, and it's important for a number of reasons, because the power of storytelling, I just think, is absolutely huge. And it was really interesting. So I mentioned the book. I unashamedly plug it because all of the royalties go to Land Aid. So as authors, we get nothing out of it. And hands up here who doesn't know about Land Aid. But, they're a really great charity for the property sector. But basically, chapter 7 in the book is all about perspectives. And what we got was basically people to tell their stories. And the power of that storytelling, I think, is just absolutely huge. And there's one person in there that I'll just draw on for the purposes of our session today, which is Hashi Mohammed. Many of you might know Hashi. He's a barrister at number 5. He's one of the top planning barristers in this country. But his story, and he's very open about the story, is that he grew up in Kenya. He was one of 9 children. And basically his father died when he was aged 9, and he and 4 siblings arrived here in the UK as unaccompanied minors. He had a pretty tough upbringing, but he got spotted at school. He went to Hertfordshire University and then on to Oxford to study. And it really shows that how, the power of people actually spotting that and then really helping him on his way. But his power of telling that story, he came to CBRE, he talked to our investor clients, and you could literally hear a pin drop when he was telling the story because it was just so powerful. And it's really interesting, whenever I talk about the book, I always ask the audience one thing. So I am asking you, and it's not to go out and buy the book, quite surprisingly. It's actually to tell your story. You're all passionate about what you do. And the biggest impact that we can have as professionals is tell our story to the next generation. Many of us have come into this sector by default rather than by design. And I think, be that role model, be out there and tell that story for the next generation.
I think that's really important. And Mike, if you don't mind, if I can bring you in, because you posted something incredible on LinkedIn today, which you shared it on there, so I hope you don't mind me talking about it today. But you talked about a story where, in a job interview, you were told, if I get this right, let's be honest, you're not going to get this job. You put that on LinkedIn today, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
And I just think I read that story and I thought, that is an incredible story to hear, and to know that someone's been through that, and when other people might be struggling in the face of adversity, I think it's really powerful to be sharing those sorts of things.
Yeah, the story was about passion and the fact that you can see it, you can hear it, but you can't buy it. And passion is the thing that unlocks our talent. And the story I told was at 21, all I wanted to do was be in business and be a leader. And I went for an interview at a large supermarket for their graduation program and sat in front of a panel of 7, and they asked me my name and why I was there. And after 30 seconds, the chair stopped me and said, look, you know and I know you're not going to get this job, so you must be used to disappointments. And that was it. And I think that's what sparked my passion in disability. I was absolutely, you talk about default rather than design. By design, I didn't want any career related to disability. And that moment, my whole life switched, and I became really passionate about doing disability and making sure that we, as retailers of property, reflect the customers and the employees. 22% of people in the UK have rights under disability. That is a huge, huge number. And we, and all of us in here today, you cannot afford to ignore that number of people as we look to bounce back.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Mike. So we're going to move on because you talked about inspiring the next generation. Your second top tip is all around mentoring, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about this. How many here have got a mentor? How many people are a mentor? Well, more of you are a mentor, so that's really good. And I think, being a mentor is it's a great gift that somebody is giving you in terms of trusting you and working with you to help them on their career journey. And I think, there's a real opportunity for us through mentorship in terms of, so for the first time, actually 4 years ago, I got a reverse mentor. So I'm a reverse mentee, which I hugely value. And Justin Carty, some of you may know him at CBRE, he's an amazing guy, and he really keeps me grounded. And as I joined the business, I really wanted to have somebody who knew his way around the business, and it would just give me that different perspective. But I mentor about 20, 30 people, if you kind of add them all up into a mix. But people want different things from you at different times, and I think that's okay. And a lot of the people that I've used in my own career have been people that I haven't put the label on that they're actually my mentor, but I've just got mentoring advice from them, and I think that's okay as well. So, and why does that matter? Well, I think, as I say, it's a gift to be a mentor, and I think if you can, as you climb the ladder, and, we're all pretty senior here, I think bringing someone with you and helping support them on their journey is, again, one of the greatest gifts that you can give.
Yeah, certainly. The efforts that people have made who've gone ahead of us, we reap the rewards of it, for sure. So thank you. And then finally from you, Amanda.
Yeah, well, this was, I love this one. So we got Farley Katz, who's from the New Yorker fame, to do lots of illustrations in the book. Sorry, I'm talking about it more than I thought. But one of my favourite illustrations is Walking the Talk. And it's a really great sketch. So if I describe it to you, there's a guy basically walking his dog with his baseball cap back to front. And then there's a lady in a smart suit walking a pair of false teeth. I promise you, you will now not forget that image. And the guy is looking at her and she says, "Have you never seen anybody walking the talk before?" And I think it's really good because, again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. But the power of the pictures is, of course, the messages that people take away. And the message that I'd love you to take away from the conversation is basically being the change that you want to create and having the courage to walk tall and, effectively being... walking the talk and calling it out. Because I think if we all do our own little bit along the journey, we're going to make a difference. And that's all we can ask for, really.
Excellent. Thanks, Amanda. So, Subjit, over to you. You've got a question for us.
I have. One of the things that always used to bother me when I was younger in the industry is that I could never really look up to anyone who was like me. I couldn't see another brown face in the industry. If I went to the BCSE dinner, the IPF dinner, I'd look around the room and I could barely see any other ethnic faces. And that used to kind of bother me a lot because I think there's no one who really understands me. And so that's something I carry with me now. And I always think that it's important for people to be able to look up to others in the industry and see people that are like them. I think it's probably got a lot better for women in the industry now, that they can see senior women leaders. I think there was a seminar with about 50 senior real estate women, which is fantastic. I'm still kind of searching to see the ethnic people that I can look up to specifically, but I think that's really, really important for younger people coming into the industry. And I spoke to a friend of mine about about that and a little bit about mentoring as well. And I said to him, so who do you look up to? And he said, well, the only one I can look up to is you. And I thought, on one hand, that's a bit naff, right? It's just me. But on the other hand, I thought, it's a nice compliment. But then again, is that it? Is that the end of what the real estate industry can offer somebody of colour specifically? So even though there are things that sometimes bother me, I just think, no, you've got to kind of carry on going and at least present yourself to the younger generation at least, so they can look up to you.
There's something in there about the accidental role model when you look round and you go, I am the most senior person like me in this company, and whoops, that means that someone might be looking up to me. That comes with responsibility.
It does.
And no one signs up for that.
No.
Let's have a look at the answers. Hopefully you've been answering the question. That is amazing. I mean, either only one person answered or, okay, so we're going to we're starting to see some no's come through. I think from my perspective, I can just look up in the industry and see someone who represents my background. But it's, there's a very small number, and there's, it's not plentiful. I work at Hammerson. We, in the last couple of years, now have a female CEO, and we have an Asian CFO. That's quite different, and we're certainly hopeful that that brings some real benefits longer term as well. So we're starting to see a few more no's come through there.
Yeah, I've only ever seen Manish Chand of Clearbell. There is a guy, Sanjeev, at M&G, although I'm not sure if he had a real estate surveying background, I'm not quite sure. But after that, I run out of people quite quickly.
So if we go back to the slides, we've got some tips from you, Subjit, haven't we? So this is a great one for everyone in the audience, right? Be the one to ask the question.
Yeah, I always think that it's, if you're in a room full of people in a normal meeting, whether it's might be a leasing meeting, asset management meeting, development planning, whatever it may be, you should just take a look around the room and then ask the question about why there isn't greater diversity. If you're in the client-side position, it's a lot easier to insist on a bit more diversity with your consultants, whether they are architects, building surveyors, or anyone else. I found that there is a lot more diversity amongst the design and creative professions, such as architects or marketing people, and also to a certain extent in the construction industry. But rent review surveyors, letting agents, building surveys, the diversity is not great. And I think it's on everyone to just ask the question. And when you ask the question, you start to make a very small change.
There's a real fundamental point here, right, which is that in every all-male team, someone decided to bring a woman into that team, right? That was a male choice, in the same way that in an all-white team, someone in that team chose to bring in a person of colour. It sits with the privilege, or it sits with the majority to take steps. And that's about starting the question, being the one to be willing to ask, why is it that this is how we are? And what is it that we're missing value-wise as a result of potentially your thinking in a similar way?
And then
challenge.
Just before I go on to challenge, I'm just going to add another example. In 30 years of working in the real estate industry, there's only been one occasion when I worked on a project, probably about 5 years ago, where the numbers of ethnic people in the property meeting outnumbered the numbers of non-ethnic people. And at the time, I turned it into a joke. And I said to the guy, who's a white letting agent, you've never been outnumbered before. I then said, we're taking over completely now. And the other Asian guys in the room and the Asian girl in the room found it hilarious. The guy in question was a bit uncomfortable, but that was my way of dealing with it with a bit of humour. But in 30 years, that's the only time it's ever happened that I've seen one other ethnic face in the room that I'm in a meeting of. But go on, next question, Howard.
Thanks, Subjit. So, challenge. So when we talk about being the one to ask the question, it can sometimes feel like you might be being difficult or aggressive. It doesn't have to be that way, does it?
No. And there was a little poll earlier on about whether people could really be themselves and bring their whole selves to work. or if they've ever felt uncomfortable, and there's quite a lot of people that felt that. And I know of examples where one in particular was a young woman in the real estate industry who worked for one of the top 4 firms, and she was in a situation where somebody made a lewd comment to her. Now, she was a graduate, and that affected her quite severely, so that she was in tears on a Sunday, having to face work on a Monday, and I don't think she stayed for another 6 months in that job. And she also said to me later on that she felt that everything in the industry, all of the events were geared around men. There was a strong drinking culture, which she hated, and it just made her feel uncomfortable. And friends of hers had also left the industry. And if you are in a situation where you get an uncomfortable comment, or somebody says something or acts inappropriately, the non-aggressive way that you can deal with it is just by saying to them, what do you mean by that? You don't have to have a go at them. You don't have to swear at them or say something clever back. All you need to do is say to them, what do you mean by that? And then let them explain. The spotlight goes on them, and they should hopefully feel a bit stupid in front of all of their colleagues. And it also means that you don't have to be seen as being the person with a chip on your shoulder who's making a big issue out of what might have been a joke at the time.
It's a really powerful question. I've used it before, and it certainly does the trick and makes people think again. Okay. And then this might seem a bit obvious to our friends in the audience, but being yourself is really important, right?
It is. And I always like having a quirky mix of people on the team. And I've been a little bit lucky on a few occasions where I've worked with creative people who bring something completely different to the table. And if you can be yourself and go into your office and be totally yourself, hopefully you'll make a small change. Then other younger people coming through also feel that they can be themselves, and that might make a little ripple effect throughout. And if you've got a lot of different people truly being themselves in the workplace, that ought to make it a more interesting and fun workplace for you and for them, and nobody has to then wear a mask when they're going into the office doing their job.
I can particularly relate to this one. If I go back to the first, we don't need to do it on the slides, I'm just talking figuratively. Go back to that first question. I was the one that no one saw, if you like, on this panel. Whether or not I choose whether or not to express my my diverse stance in a way that the three of you, it's different for you. And the wasted energy that goes to living in the closet is complete wasted energy. You want people focusing on doing a great job, working with people, building relationships, creating value. That's what brings value, not skirting around pronouns, avoiding talking about what you did at the weekend. And this is still an issue, okay? 30% of graduates going into the workplace go back in the closet. 30%. They are wasting energy hiding a part of who they are. This isn't about being overt or unnecessarily sharing personal stories. It's just about being yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Mike, we'll come to you. Got a question?
Yeah, so just in terms of the context, I'm most often called Mike, but I'm also called a 17%er, and that relates to the fact that I was born with a disability, but 83% of the 14 million disabled people in the UK acquire their disability during their life. I'm also called a 20%er. You know, I walk into this room, you know pretty quickly that I have a disability, but 80% of disabled people have hidden disabilities, and we have to reorientate the way we think what disability is. And the international sign has done so much to raise the profile of disability, but only 8% of disabled people are wheelchair users. So if you think about disability, you think about mental health, you think about dyslexia, you think about autism, you think about long-term health conditions, you think about cancer and recovering from cancer as the definition of disability. And my question is, given that broader definition, do you have someone in your family or close friendship network that has a disability?
Yeah, good question. So phones out, and if you haven't already, please give us an answer. Did I hear you right? 80% of people acquire their disability. They're not born with
83%.
83.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? So let's flick over to the answers, Amanda.
No, I was just going to say, I think, that hidden disability is always the one as well that's really difficult to understand and to gauge. And I think, look, we've had a really tough sort of 18 months, I think, particularly this last period. And, mental health, I think, has really kind of come to the fore, and I don't think we're quite through that yet. But I think there's a real opportunity around creating networks at work, particularly, we've looked at the Ability Network at CBRE. It's one of our news networks, and I feel that that's really important because people have got all kinds of disability that they're dealing with, either themselves or in their family. So actually trying to extend it more broadly than just the individual is really important as well.
Yeah, I massively agree. Are you surprised by this figure, Mike?
Well, it's interesting that 5 years ago, some research said that 50% of the workforce in the UK would have a disabled relative or someone close in their network. Today, you're telling me it's 92%. I am not surprised. And if you do the nephew test, the grandma test, the granddad test, the uncle test, would you want to work for an organisation that if your relative or family friend came in to where you worked, they would have a worse experience simply because they had a disability? And the answer is no, which is why it's all our responsibility as individuals, as teams, as organisations, to do something positive about it.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Mike. So if we go back to the slides, we'll move on to number 1, test your route.
Yeah, and I think this is the home to desk test, really. And I listened in to the sessions before about how do we redefine property, how do we redefine space, and it's how do we redefine what we mean by accessibility. So that might be the acoustics, that might be just the amount of text that has to be read, that might be, is your accessible toilet facilities really accessible? And we did a session with young disabled consumers about 3 weeks ago, and they unequivocally said, one day we will be running this town. I think what they meant was they will be the leaders of the future. And they said, but we don't want to have daily constant battles with mops. And I think what they meant is they don't want to go out, use accessible toilets, and see it being used as a storage cupboard, and about that kind of equity. So it's thinking about your business and thinking about all those kind of points which are more than just physical access, more than just ramps and lifts, and about how accessible you are.
It is so much more than ramps and lifts. I would say even just today, and this is no criticism to our hosts here, but I turned up, I had a wheelie suitcase and it was a bit too heavy to be running up and down the stairs, right? We've all done this up and down loop, right? If you couldn't go up and down stairs, that would have been much more challenging. And I asked what the step-free access was. Mild panic set in because no one had an immediate answer, because I think I was probably the first one of the day to ask the question. But this is a really important one. Number 2, this one's quite interesting, unplugging your mouse.
Yeah, and I'm always nervous about saying it now at conferences, because I did it about 18 months ago at a conference, and I said, look, to realise how accessible your online website is, when you go home this evening, log on, unplug your mouse, and see how far you can navigate just using the arrow keys and a keyboard, because that will give you a real indication about how accessible you are. And just remember that, websites now are the main gateway into your business. What I didn't realise is that everyone just got out their bags, got out their laptops and did it there and then and didn't bother listening to me for the next 45 minutes. But it really gives you a sense of accessibility. Do you have a site map? Do the first sentences in the landing page, are they all capitalised for stylistic reasons? Because a screen reader will read it as an acronym. It would be WELCOME. And by the time they get to find out, blind person, who you are, they'll be off. And just to say to you, 17.1 billion is lost through what they call the click-away pound, where disabled people and their families leave a website without a purchase due to poor accessibility or poor customer service. And I will say to you, 65-70% of changes to improve navigation can be done overnight and at no cost at all. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can come across in any way, from a B2B platform where we want to be working with all sorts of partners, retailers, businesses. It's got to be available to all, right?
Absolutely. Just on B2B, because it's so important, an organisation nearly lost a contract because one of their key people was deaf and they couldn't access the contact centre. And they said, if you don't improve accessibility of the contact centre, we are moving our entire contract. So this is a B2C and a B2B issue.
Yeah. Commercial gain. We all need it. And the 6-second rule, I found this one fascinating, and it's really given me, quite literally, pause for thought.
No, absolutely. And do you know, this is something I only learnt 3 months ago when I was on autistic Asperger's training myself. And the fact is, if you ask a question, you give the person 6 seconds to answer. And we're talking about people on the neurodiverse spectrum. And it enables that individual to process what you have asked and process their answer. And you know as well as I do, and I'm just at fault, there's an uncomfortableness about the silence, and you try to step in and second guess giving them an answer. And 95% of the time you get it wrong. And someone came up to me the other day and he has a stammer. And he said it so infuriates them, and that they've now talked about the 6-second rule, because it enables them to answer the question in the answer that they want. And last week we did a webinar on dementia, and the person on the webinar with dementia said, please give me 6 seconds to answer so I can process. And you suddenly unlock the ability to have a two-way conversation. And Purple is about changing the disability conversation. And if you do one thing as you leave here tonight, think about that 6-second rule and apply it. It makes a huge difference.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Okay, how are we doing on time? Right, we're coming up to 1:45. We're all going to be out of here in 10 minutes. But I've got one question last for you. So, we're on to my bit, which I'm going to squeeze a bit because these three were the ones who I wanted to hear mainly from today. But if you get your phones out again, if you think back to the last interview that you went to, either as the hiring manager or as the candidate, so you might be reflecting on this yourself, did the hiring manager talk about the company's approach to diversity unprompted? And my reason for asking this is we are in the great reshuffle. The war for talent is rife, and candidates can afford to be more choosy. I am on the lookout for whether or not I think an employer is going to be a safe space for me, whether or not I can bring my whole self to work, and whether or not my career is going to thrive. And I'm not the only one. There's going to be plenty of people out there who are thinking like that. But am I going to have to ask about your diversity policies? Or are you going to prompt that and offer it up to me unprompted? So let's have a look. No. I'm delighted to see 21% have done that, and hopefully there are some hiring managers in the room and they're talking about themselves. This is really powerful, and I'd certainly encourage you to think about it. For those of you who are in positions where you recruit, where you interview, that you think about this and offer it up unprompted. Great, let's flick back to the slides. So I've got 3 things to share with you. Never default to a single gender. Okay. What does that mean? One of the most uncomfortable things I have to do is correct people who ask me if I have a wife, right? So I wear a ring, as does my partner, and many, many occasions, actually, it's either been, what does your wife do? I mean, why you're interested in this imaginary person's career, I'm not sure. What are they like? What's their name? Those sorts of things. And that means that someone doesn't know me, that we're having that sort of conversation. And when you don't know someone, you're trying to build a rapport, right? So correcting someone is not something you want to do in early stages of trying to build a relationship with someone. So having to step in and say, oh, sorry, no, actually, and that's quite uncomfortable. It's even more uncomfortable if there is a power imbalance. If I'm talking to someone who's got more power than me, by whatever means, this can be a really uncomfortable situation. So just be really, really conscious about the choice of language. The other thing around defaulting to a single gender, I'm going to use the CFO example, right? CFO, many of us will default to picturing a man. Some of us won't, and that's great. But the sort of language around, imagine, new CFO announced into a company. A few years back, it would be, what's he like or what's she like? You know, there was that differentiation. The she is an afterthought. And then we're getting better, so it's what's he or she like. But what if you asked it the other way around? What if you led with she? What is she or he like? That sounds weird to us, right? We don't hear that ordering of gender in that sort of circumstance. But you're giving it equal weighting, but you're starting from a different point. That demonstrates inclusivity. Whoever you're talking to, you're showing that you are living it. So that's one thing to think about. No, I could go to prison. I posted on LinkedIn for LGBT History Month earlier this year an article on how to be a great ally. And this was one of the things that got probably the most attention. I can be killed for who I am in 11 countries around the world, and in 72, I can go to prison. Right? I've worked in business development and commercial development roles where I've been flown around the country, including to countries where I could be killed with the death penalty for who I am, and I have never had a colleague say, are you okay going to insert country? I only noticed this a bit later on in life. It didn't harm me at the time, but it could have, and being a great ally and knowing what it could mean to your colleagues when travelling is an important point. It's not just work travel, right? If you're focused in the UK, you might want to think about where you go on holiday. You might want to think about where you spend your own personal money. Because if you're going to tell me about your holiday to Jamaica or Dubai, I'm probably going to switch off. I'm not that interested, I'm afraid. And the last one is start the conversation. So we're here today initiating this conversation. All of you have got the power to start these conversations. Wherever you work and in whatever role, what is it that we do for this? How are we going to progress this course? How are we going to make this a better place to work for us, for our colleagues, for our teams, for our bosses as well? What is it that we can do? I don't mind helping in any shape or form, but it gets a little tiring when I have to start every conversation on this topic, which I don't, by the way. Ready to round out? Okay, right, so the title of this was, what does this mean for your bottom line? The top quartile for gender diverse companies are 25% more likely to outperform, right? Who wouldn't want to outperform or stand a 25% greater chance of outperforming their peers? And if you go to ethnic diversity, that raises to 36%. It's not enough to have the tick box of different people. You have to live it, right? It doesn't come. These are really important. And this research is pretty static. Time and time again, this research is done. And time again, gender diversity and ethnic diversity delivers to your bottom line. The annual value of the purple pound, which is spending power of families with at least one disabled member, £270 billion, and rising by 14% per annum. That is a market to be going after. And lastly, a closeted LGBT colleague is 17% more likely to resign in the future than one who isn't closeted. And in this war for talent, we all know how long it takes for someone to get recruited, trained up, get up to speed. We want to hold on to our great people. We want to make it a great place for them to work, not lose them. Can't afford to have that leakage. So I would really like to thank this fantastic panel of contributors who've joined us today. We'll do a big round of applause at the end, and feel free to whoop and cheer. That's also okay. But this is there's an incredible amount of work that goes into this sort of space. The four of us and many other people out here are starting these conversations and initiating it. But this requires an army of volunteers to get involved. The fact that you're here shows that you're already involved in some shape or form. I really encourage you all to think about what else you might be able to do, what you might take away from today. And again, not just because it makes the world a better place, but because it also delivers commercial benefit. Boy, do we need it. Thank you very much.